Hey guys, can you hear me? Just give me 1 second. Just finishing up the setup here. All right. Cool. I think we are live, and it's working. I think this time I made sure that the internet was fine and everything was working from the beginning. So I'm hoping not to have too many problems in terms of connectivity and all that today. So if you see that I don't know my voice is getting choppy or something, let me know and we'll take it from there. But yeah. All right, how's it going? How's everyone going? It's been really cool to see all the progress that you guys have been making. It's really, really cool. And I can see. It's just I'm just opening up the chat here on the side. Cool. So we have a few people here today. Hey, Steven, Alex, Winston. Hey, Etienne, Jaime. Who else is here? Cool. Just us so far. Let me just see if you guys have asked anything so far in the chat. Cool. All right. Excellent. Excellent stuff. Right. Yes. So just a quick reminder. I just saw in the chat, Jaime, you're thinking of getting Marmoset. Make sure that you do it before the 30 days of the before 30 days from the time that I posted the code expires. Otherwise, you won't get that discount. For in regards to Keyshot and Substance Painter and all that, the Substance Painter subscription is quite good. I mean, it is a subscription, and it just sometimes could be a bit of a hindrance, but it's like having Netflix. If you have Netflix, why not having Substance Painter? That's my view. And the way that I see these things is before, like even when I was a student, I didn't have much money to pay for those things. I'm not saying that's your situation. I'm just saying from my experience, I kind of like push myself to pay for that subscription or to pay for that type of stuff, even though I wasn't using it. And it's just because I'm not talking about Substance Painter either. I'm just talking about other stuff, and I just push myself to do that because it's like a gym membership, right? If you pay for it, it's like you feel bad that you're not going to the gym or something like that. So I feel bad that I wasn't using the software, so that also pushed me to use it because like, oh come on, I'm paying for this. I need to do I need to do something with it. So that's just another way to view it, but might not be the case for you guys, but just wanted to share that. All right, so today is gonna be an open Q&A. I'm here for you guys, so whatever you wanna ask me in regards to the modules of the course, if you have any challenge that you're or any questions that you have at the moment, or not, or something completely different in terms of other workflow or anything in general, like what's my favorite beer. I'm here for whatever you guys need. Obviously, like I've mentioned before with the Q&As, let's just try to keep everything kind of informative or useful for the rest of us. So if it is very, very specific, the question, I will try to answer it at a later date or in the community. So let's try to keep these live sessions kind of like more general in terms of the questions that you ask. But what I thought we could do, based on what you guys asked me last week, was it last week or the previous week when I was sick? I'm still sick a little bit, but much better. Is to show you kind of like a behind the scenes of this image that you can see here, which is the moss collector. It's a real time kind of like illustration that I did a while ago, and the fact that it's a real time kind of like render in Marmoset, it just allows you to generate all these type of modes. So going from this daylight time or dusk type of thing is to the night view, it's really really easy. So I want to show you anything that you want to see from the character creation, the texturing, the setup of all these things, the mouse, and all these little bits and pieces. So anything that you guys want, I'm happy to start there. Like if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat, and I'll address those. Otherwise, I'll just start like showing you stuff, and then you can come up with new questions, I guess. So I know there is a little bit of a delay, so I'm just gonna wait. If you guys have any questions about this or anything specific that you want me to show you from the mouse collector, we'll start from there. Otherwise, I have some marmoset scenes and serious stuff that I already prepared, and I can just jump into those. So let me know. All right. Cool. No questions about that so far, and just want to make sure the delay is not that bad. All right. So since there is no questions just yet, all right, I just saw one from Jaime. So I would be interested in seeing the behind the scenes of the grass. Cool. Yeah. So we can start with the grass. That is generally speaking one of the most asked questions that I get in regards to this project, like how to do the mouse on the grass. So I can show you that. Let's have a look. So I'm gonna minimize that. I have a few scenes. See, a few scenes in here. This is the kind of like work in progress scene of the mouse collector, and there are a few things that you won't be able to see in the final one because either I change them or let's say, so this is the final one. So you won't be able to see kind of like these small fireflies, which are just like little objects that I created, like these ones. So let me see. So you see this is already real time, and all the normal maps and transparencies have been applied. So these little guys here, see this little guy, it's didn't make it didn't make it to the final one. Sorry about that. Maybe here we go. So this one is easier to see. So these little guys didn't make it to the final one. They're like super simple. Like the geometry of it is just a blob. Like I even left it kind of like in the blockout stage because it was gonna be so tiny, and I was gonna play with depth of field that it wasn't gonna be that visible. So this one didn't make it, and there's a few other things. There are a few other things that didn't make it to the final. But roughly speaking, here is the final scene in real time. And what I'm going to be showing you based on what Jaime asked is how to set up, or how I set up this moss, or this the grass all around. So there are a few bits and pieces. So there is this one, which is clearly, I just rotate the lighting around so you can see more of it. So there is this one, that's kind of like one. There is this other one, this other mesh. Let's see if I can show you a little bit better. So there's this one, which is kind of like these little branches, and that's what makes the moss effect so kind of like fluffy and compact. Whereas the other ones, the leaves is what makes it more kind of like stand out and make it more of a feature piece. There's a couple more things. So there's these ones, these little buds. And I'm just having a hard time finding the other ones, but they're there. So this is not the final scene. That's why everything is a little bit messy. The guy's missing the hair, some of the moss here at the top as well. So this is just a work in progress that I was doing to test the lighting and everything else without the textures. So let's jump into a simplified scene. I'll come back to this if you guys have any questions about the setup. But let me show you. By the way, this is I'm not sure if you've seen this. This is Roger Waters from Pink Floyd, the old and the young one. Something that I just finished a few days ago. Let's see. All right, here we go. So I have. So this is the mushroom. Let me just go for the moss, the grass, right? So that's the one. I'm assuming this is one of the things that Jaime asked. So this is the grass, and I did a couple of them, a couple of techniques to get the grass going, right? So one was with fiber mesh. So if I turn on, hang on, just a couple of things. If I turn on wireframe, and I'm going to change the color so you guys can see a little bit better. Maybe white is better. All right. So this is ultimately the same process that I used to populate the scene with grass. So using fiber mesh, I created these kind of like hair cards. So you'll see it's very simple. It has one, two, three set of polygons, right? And I use a texture to drive kind of like the shape of them. So, or not the shape, sorry, the what you can see. So you see I have an image here, and I'm gonna bring in that image so you can see it. So moss, grass, here we go. I also use, let me just go ahead and open it up. It's gonna open in Photoshop, 1 second. Didn't have Photoshop opened. Right, so you see I just took a very like a rubbish image of a grass. I even did some paint over. This is very rough, but it's so thin and so small that you won't be able to see it. So I didn't spend too much time making it perfect, and that's one of the things. If I wanted to do a close-up to the grass, then I would make sure I have a better looking grass than this. But it's just one of those assets that you use to sort of populate the scene and make it look richer, but it's not too detailed. It's kind of like what I mentioned during the course about min maps in a game. So if you have a game engine that's kind of like an open world and you have the character close to an asset, then that asset might display the higher resolution image or the higher resolution textures of that asset so that it looks better. But in the distance, the game engine will use the same map to a smaller resolution so that it's very blurry, and it just gives you a hint of the colors and all that, but it doesn't need to render in real time like higher resolution maps. And that's what min maps are, and that's the idea with this, right? I also created an alpha, which is a black and white image. So white is what you can see, black is what you cannot, and that's essentially what I have here set up in Marmoset with this material. I have the albedo, and I have transparency, and I also changed the diffusion method. By default, it should be Lambertian, and I changed it to subsurface scattering. That's always a mouthful to say. And the idea is that because it is such a thin layer or such a thin object, the light should pass through, or it should be translucent to simulate that grass. So if I rotate the lighting around, you'll see if I put the light behind it, you can see a little bit of the transparency. I'm going to turn off the wireframe now that you know what it is. So you can see a little bit of that translucency, and you can play around with these values, and you see how much you let the light goes through the object. Let's just change that to a more yellowish color. Right, so these are the values that I would change to make sure there is some translucency and some transparency, well, not transparency, sorry, translucency in the material for this grass. The way that I created this was just with fiber mesh. So I used a fiber mesh object, exported it into these small sort of pieces, and put it together in Marmoset. So not very complex, but once you put more of these together, it started to look really really complex in a way. But also these are all the same. So all of these pieces of grass are using exactly the same image. So something else that you can do if you want to variate this to a degree is to create, let's say, 3 types of fiber mesh, and then use 3 types of grasses or 3 types of images, which is not very hard to do, and that will make it more interesting. All right, let me check the chat. In ZBrush, what light direction and material is best for sculpting, and how do you prepare your work in progress shows? Do you render them in Keyshot? All right, so Alex is asking about work in progress mainly and how to present with Keyshot. Sorry, with in ZBrush or working with ZBrush. So those are questions. I'm not sure in which module you are right now, but those are questions that I answer in the third module about presentation. But just as a quick reminder, or as a quick way to answer that question, I'm just going to jump into ZBrush, and here we have the character, the moss collector character without the, with the extra flicks, and these things didn't make it to the final one, but I'll explain why. But to sculpt and to move things around, so I prefer to sculpt with the standard materials. I have, so again, let me just recap. So what Alex asked is about a presentation and how to work in ZBrush for better sculpting. So all the presentation stuff, and whether you present in Keyshot or ZBrush, it doesn't really matter. It's just about how you present your work to make it very appealing. That's covered in the third module. So in this instance, what I'm going to show you is what I prefer to use for sculpting and why. So I have a few materials that I use constantly, which are here, and I'll show you why. So when you start sculpting, I prefer to start with the madcap gray, just because it is a very cool standard way of sculpting. Now, if you start, let's say, with the skin shade 4, which is the normal skin shader, it gives you a good representation of the volumes with a white color. So you can also use poly paint. When you get to the module when we talk about poly painting, you'll see we will create our own material, and some of you guys might have already get there. Maybe Jaime has already gone through it, so he can just vouch for it. We create our own material to do poly paint and make sure that poly paint comes through. So that's another thing. But when you're doing sculpting, again, I prefer to start with the madcap gray, and then every now and again I switch between this one and the basic material that has a more specular highlight. And this is also something that we talked about in the module of detailing the model, in the second module, which is, it has to do with the surface noise and the amount of roughness that you add with those details that is going to change this specular. So if I subdivide this a few times, and let's just go to the standard brush. So you see the specular point is quite narrow in a way. So as soon as I start doing these details, you will be able to see them a little bit better than if I use the skin shade 4, right? So depending on the stage that you're at, and this is a very personal thing, so I would recommend to work with something like madcap gray or the basic material, but any other material will work. I also have these ones that are kind of like variation of the specular. And when I'm doing something like hard surface modeling, or I got to a point that the model is already quite detailed, I tested with this custom material, which is kind of like a comic style, and this allows me to see whether or not the details are very pushed into the surface in a way. But it doesn't really matter. It's just something. I mean, it doesn't matter which one you choose, as long as you choose something that allows you to evaluate the volumes and the details for your model. Another good one, if you go to materials, is, let's see where it is, this one, the madcap metal 04. I think this is another good one that will show you quite a bit of the details. But generally speaking, you can just simply take the skin shade 4 and update it with color and some tweaks in the material to make it work for both scenarios, for blocking and for poly painting as well as detailing. So a quick thing that you can do in order to turn this into a more kind of like a clay material is to select a lighter color that you think works, maybe greenish, desaturated. Now let's go for something closer to the clay color, right? Something like that, just to work with a bit of color, which is interesting. And then let's put this material here, and you can just play around with this. So the first thing that I would change from the skin shade 4 is the the anisotropic specular. So the anisotropic specular is the one that creates this ring of specularity, and there is kind of like something darker in the middle. So if I change this to 0, you'll see it becomes more specular. So that right now, just with that little, let's just change that to 0. That to 0, this 2 to 0, make it very close to the basic material. So that's something that you can do. You can increase the specular just to see it more obvious. And I will also change the color from blue to just a white color. And also, you can play around with how much diffuse you're actually seeing. I'll push that to the 100%, and the ambient occlusion is just gonna, the ambient color is just gonna generally brighten the entire thing. So if I push this to 100, it's just gonna be very, very overexposed. So I'll just keep it around 15. And if you're having trouble or you're having problems seeing kind of like underneath the model, I would change the lighting as well. And this is another, just trying to answer that question from Alex of how I use the light while sculpting. Generally speaking, I don't change this. I think that light works well, but sometimes it's good to just put it on a side, so you can, especially if you're working with symmetry, because if I turn on symmetry, but I have my light on the side, I have the best, I have the best of both worlds, right? I can work on this side where I can see things a little bit clearer, but then in this more contrasted area, I can see really how the volume is shaping up. So that's one way to do it, right? Another way to do it is just leave the light in the way that it is, and go to preferences. Preference, render properties here, and turn off shadows. So this switch here, and that will turn these shadows a little bit. So that also helps. And in the light itself, I prefer to just keep the shadows on, to be honest, but if you wanted to turn it off, it's there. Another thing you can do is from the light itself, you can increase the ambient or the intensity. I don't play around much with this, but you could do it if you want to find the kind of like perfect way that helps you visualize the volumes. Right? You can increase the ambient like that. So all this is to say that whatever you choose to work with, it doesn't really matter as long as it's something that is helping you visualize the details, the contour of the sculpture, the volumes and all that, and that is ultimately up to you. I would personally recommend to use just to keep it simple with these materials, the basic matcap and the gray matcap and the basic material too. Cool. So Steven, if you have a bake normal map, is it possible to use this map to bake the other maps? Occlusion, curvature in Substance Painter. I've heard this is possible. Yes, it is possible, as in you can use the normal map to create the rest of the maps based on the normal map. I wouldn't do it myself. I prefer to have the actual geometry, and that creates something a little bit more accurate. Because ultimately what the normal map is just a y, x, and z coordinates, and each coordinate has a color. And it's very similar to what a 3D object is, right? Just having they're just points in the 3D space and coordinates in the y, x, and y, x and z axis. So in that, so in a way, it's very similar. You can extract that information from a normal map to apply to the others. But I would personally suggest to do it straight from the 3D object. I haven't done it from the normal map. I know it's possible to a degree, but it's not super accurate. If you have an object and you manage to extract the normal map from that object, I think it's just easier to do it straight from that object. Like if you already have the object and you could make the normal map, I don't see the advantage of in that workflow to create that after you have the normal map. Just better create everything at once. And when you get to that module, you'll see the multi-map exporter is just really easy to use. if you want to do it from ZBrush. Otherwise, in Substance Painter is just a breeze. By the way, the new Substance Painter, the latest version, is really fast for baking, so it takes no time. And in Marmoset, you can also do it. In Marmoset, it's really easy. Maybe that's a little update that I'm going to do to that baking section in Marmoset, just because it is really easy, and it's actually very helpful for anything that is hard surface modeling. So I'll do that in the future. The character that you just showed us in render in Marmoset or Keyshot. So the moss collector is all rendered in Keyshot. Sorry, it's in Marmoset. Here is the character again. Maybe it is a little bit dark. I'm gonna go into full monitor just so you can see it, and I'm gonna increase the lighting a tiny bit, the brightness, so you can see more of it. But this is essentially the same shaders and the same, not the same lighting, but the same shaders and textures that I use for the final one. And I just wanted to show you this one because all I did for the other two characters is I took my main character and I posted in different positions, variate a little bit the texture in Substance Painter just very quickly, and then the hues very slightly in Photoshop of the albedo color, and that creates the effect that are three different characters. But if you really pay attention to, let's say, the distribution of the teeth, right, it is exactly the same. So these are exactly the same characters. For this one, I got rid of this hairstyle, and for this one, I think this one is exactly the same as this one. But those are not the main focus of the illustration of the final render. So they're kind of like in the distance, and it's hard to tell that, it gives the impression that is a new character, that like are actually three different characters. So yeah, so hopefully that answers that question. Oh, hey Mike, how's it going? No worries, mate. Yeah, you can catch up with this one if you're still at work. Concentrate on your work. So cool, Alex. Thanks. I'm not in the third module yet. I will check that out. Cool. Sorry, the other character on your wall. The other character on my wall. Which one? Steven? You mean this character? Or you mean these ones? Not sure. Well, anyway, if you're referring to this one, yeah, this is Keyshot, and those ones are Keyshot as well, and this is just ZBrush, if you're referring to any of those. Cool. So I'm gonna go back to the male character. The male character, but can you see it in the wall, like right now? Am I missing something? Hey James, good to have you on board. You had it on your monitor. Ah, yes. All right. Fair enough. I know what you're talking about now. So let me just show you. That is, I'm gonna minimize this and this. This one, I think this is the one that Steven is talking about. So this is meant to be a combination, like a stylized combination between Roger Waters, Roger Waters' young version of Roger Waters and an older version of Roger Waters from Pink Floyd, right? The lead singer, and yes, yeah, cool. So this one. So this guy is all rendered in Marmoset. I can show you a little bit of that as well. I did it just to test a few things. I wanted to push the limits of my RTX 2080, the graphics card that I have. So all these, the hair is actually literally just exported the fiber mesh from ZBrush. So I took everything, like it's a lot of polygons, and I pushed it into ZBrush. From ZBrush to Marmoset. So the Marmoset file is quite heavy, but it has all the fibers in there. So I just did it to push the limit. So Marmoset is not just for real-time render. You can just render things like this that they don't necessarily have to be real-time. You can just literally push millions of polygons into Marmoset. It's going to take a little time to process, but it can handle millions of polygons. That's why I recommended it in this course and also used it, because it is just a rendering tool. It doesn't have to be for real-time render. So yeah, this is Marmoset. the only reason, yeah, this is all Marmoset. There's nothing. I mean, it's basically showing you the same process that is in the course. Most, like 99% of the stuff that I do are based on the workshops. Sorry, on the workflows that I show in the course. That's why it's um it's kind of like the ultimate thing, that the one of the biggest projects that I've done, because I share everything. So this one is ZBrush, then Substance Painter for all the textures except the hair, because the hair is just fiber mesh. And third is Photoshop. Oh, sorry, Marmoset, and then fourth is Photoshop, just to fine tune the colors and composite everything. Like the wall is just a little hint about the wall, as well as the kind of like the logo. If you like Pink Floyd, I'm sure you're familiar with it. Um, if you don't know about Pink Floyd, you probably heard of the song "We Don't Need No Education." So this one is the this is the one. So the wall is just so I rendered this with a transparency, and the wall is just a plane in Photoshop behind it, and I just composited with a drop shadow. That's really all about it. But I can show you this in another time with more detail. The let's go back to the mouse collector, and let's see if there's questions here. Cool. James Sushia, cool. Alex, just curious, how long did it take you to put this course together? Oh man, this has been in the making for years. I'd say about 8 years took me to put this course together. Um, just because I'm refining I refine all the process and all the steps to condense it into a single course. But in terms of recording it, testing it, putting all the different references and resources, it took about 8 months just to put everything together so that it's ready for you guys, like the final bits. Um, but yeah, it's been in the making for years, like the processes and the stuff that I've been developed. Uh, you could say that it's been in the making for 8 years or so. Cool, looks cool. All right, so yeah, that's maybe that's a good way to put it. The Marmoset renderer is just a powerful tool that can render either real time, like in this case. And when I say real time, is I mean, let me bring in the other one. I'm gonna try to be a little bit more clear about what I say in terms of real time. Right. So I'm gonna turn this little speedy viewport, and you'll see the quality changes a little bit. So this quality and this slow processing, or sorry, not slow, low kind of like processing, is closer to what a real time is. So Marmoset allows you to display things in real time. So it's based on PBR, uh, physically based rendering workflow. So that's why you can use the textures from Substance Painter and so on. But it's not necessarily the same look that will give you in a render engine. So at this point, what I have here is closer to what you would have in a render engine like Unity, for example. As soon as I start adding all these extra effects, subsurface scattering, you know, blurring the shadows a little bit, those are computations that the software is doing in real time. I can still move in real time, so that's still real time, but it's not the same as a real time engine, or like Unreal or Unity and things like that. So real time, or when I say real time, I only mean that whatever I see is what I get, right? I don't have to click render and wait until it processes the ray tracing and all that. That's what I mean. So as a way to summarize this, Marmoset is just another render engine. It's mostly used to display or like showcase real-time characters or real-time assets or scenes, but you can use it in just as a render engine as much as you can use the Keyshot. The level of detail and the quality of the materials will vary, because in Keyshot is a more powerful engine in terms of the computation that it does, but Marmoset is capable of great things as well. So and that's just as an example, that character that I just showed you, that's not necessarily real time. It's just it allows you to create very complex stuff. Um, I love the extra touch of the fiddle head ferns for this illustration. Yeah, that fern is actually quite simple. Let me just go and show you the moss before we move forward. I'm gonna turn this off. So this is the little bits and pieces that I mentioned, that kind of like make the look of the moss so kind of like fluffy in a way. So I'm gonna get closer. So you see, it looks from the distance, or from this distance, it looks complex in a way, but all it is a plane. So if I select the wireframe mode, it's very similar to what I just showed you about the grass, right? It's just like some planes created with fiber mesh, very easily, and then these planes, they have textures. I'm gonna bring up the textures to show you what they are. Moss. Alright, I have a bit of a mess here, but I'll show you. Right. So these are a bunch of images that I used and tested in different ways. So the moss that I created for that bit is this one, right? So if I'm gonna show you this is like hand painted, but it's very rough again. So I just created some lines in Photoshop and with different colors, and just added a bit of beveling effect. And then I took I forgot the name of that brush. It's kind of like a smudge brush, and just smudge things like that to create these little spikes, I guess, and make it look more realistic. Although it's very simple. And then I took that image and I run a process to generate the normal map based on the color that I manually painted. So that gives me a little bit of the 3D-ness of these little branches, or these little pieces of moss. I also created I think this one is the roughness map, the ambient occlusion, and the curvature, and also the height map. I didn't use the height map, but it's there if I needed to. So with 1, 2, 3, well, actually this one not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 maps. That's all I needed for this. So right, so I'm gonna turn off wireframe. And get closer. So you'll see, if you're close to this thing, they look very similar to what I just showed you, to the textures. And if I rotate the light, because I have a normal map and the roughness and all that, it kind of like reacts to the light. So a combination of all that comes together in Marmoset just to make it look really, well, I wouldn't say realistic, but it sells the idea. Basically, it gives the impression that this is just a bunch of little branches and moss. And this combined with the other bits and pieces, it really sells the effect. So, but ultimately, the textures are really simple. I didn't spend much time on them because they worked. So I spent much more time on the character itself, right? So that's one thing. And let me just show you So I'm going to show you how it looks in ZBrush. So in ZBrush, sorry about that. Yeah, in ZBrush, here is how I started putting together the scene. So this is also a work in progress, but if I select, let's say, let's see where it is. So here's the moss. I'm gonna go into solo mode. You'll see it looks exactly the same in terms of how it is put together in ZBrush than it does in Marmoset. But if I select this and I turn off the texture map of this, you'll see here is the texture map. I can turn this off, and these are just a bunch of planes that I created with fiber mesh. So I created fiber mesh with a texture, this texture in this case, and the way that it's displaying with transparency is using the anti-alias and the transparent slider here in the texture map. And this is exactly what I exported into Marmoset as an FBX, and then I put all the textures together. Cool. So Jaime, thanks for sharing the mouse collector, Pablo, of your final image. Did you render everything in Marmoset, or did you also use Photoshop and add to add the background as to the image and add the depth of blur? So I did render it with Marmoset. Everything is rendered with Marmoset. I'm gonna find the final scene. It's a little bit heavy, but give me 1 second. So mouse collector, scene, render, Marmoset. I'm not sure which one it is. I have a few. Let's see if this one is the one. So you can see the render is from Marmoset. But like I said in the course, and when you get to the compositing module, you'll see that I call it the ultimate renderer. And that is true, because no matter what render you use, there's always something that you can do to make it look better, or to fine tune, or to add refinements in Photoshop, like just to enhance the image. So this is not the one. I think it's number 4. Let me just check. This is another thing that is really cool about Marmoset. Once you have the textures applied to it, you can just create a bunch of different scenarios and save different scenes. Here we go. So this is the final one. I'm gonna turn off the UI and just change the camera. So this is the final camera that I use. 1 second. I just lost my chat. Here we go. So this is the final render, and I have a bunch of cameras already set up, close-ups and so on and so forth. I'm gonna turn on the speedy viewer, and you'll see how the quality changes slightly. See, there is no translucency. The shadows are a little bit harsher, but it just makes it a little bit faster to move around. But this is the final scene, right? I'm gonna also, so the background is just an HDR that I changed the depth of field, or not the depth of field, sorry, the blurriness of it. So if you select in Marmoset, if you select the sky, by the way, all of this is covered in the Marmoset introduction and all that, but I'm just gonna show you here. But here's the HDR image, or the background that I use, and in here you can select the mode of what you can see at the background. So you can select a color, so it just shows you the color. It shows, you can do the sky, and it shows you exactly what the sky looks like. The blur sky, which is the one that I use for the final image, or you can use ambient sky, which is a very blurry, a hint of what the background is. But if you use the blur sky, which is the one that I use, you have these 2 sliders, one to change the brightness, which I rarely change, and the background blur, so you can just super blur it or change the blurriness. So I just did it a little bit like that, and the extra bit of blurriness, that's just a camera effect, right? So if I go to my camera, or let's just use this camera just to show you, and I'm gonna have to turn this speedy viewport off, and let's say I want to concentrate on this guy, right? I can select my camera. Again, all of this is covered in the Marmoset lessons, but I can open up focus and click depth of field, and that automatically generates a depth of field for the camera. And I can use sticky focus so that when I move around, the focus doesn't change. And using middle mouse button, I'm gonna click on the eyes of the character. So now the focal point of this camera is here, and no matter how far I go or how I rotate, the focal point is always gonna be this character here, or the eyes of the character, right? So this is what I love about Marmoset, that you can just spend days. I can spend days just like figuring out what's the best layout to display that. Also, that's covered in the first module when I talk about composition and all that, and I show you some examples with these guys. And if something is not working, you don't have to go back and do a whole bunch of extra stuff in ZBrush or whatever it is. You can simply take the assets that you created, because they're imported individually. Let's say that this mushroom is here. Let's say I'm gonna just move it out because it's in its own place. So I can just take that and just move it around here. For example, say, oh, this looks better there. Let's just put it in here and rotate it a little bit. So you can just do slight tweaks like this. That are not like super important, at least not the focal point, right? if you don't like this character where it is, you can just move it as well, and that sort of thing. So it's really really powerful. But that's essentially what this scene looks like, right? I'm gonna select the sky, and I'm gonna go into color so you can see it a little bit better. And that's it. The lighting setup is a little bit more complex, but it's, I mean, not super complex. Let me just show you. I have a few lights. So I have one light kind of like focusing on this character, another one focusing on the other character, and another one focusing on the main character. So these three lights are just spotlights, and the reason I created three different ones is so that I can have control over the final image on which character is more important than the other one. So this light is going to be more intense than the other two, so that it put emphasis on this character. The other ones are just kind of like fillers. This orange light, I can just move it around and you see in real time what it does. But it's just to add a tiny hint of of a warm light coming from the back here for this character. There's another one here to enhance the material properties of these mushrooms. So if I took this out, you'll see less of them. So again, this is just a omni light, or an omni light with a tiny little bit of tint just to enhance this color. And other than that, there's the main light, and this is the light that is attached to the sky, right? So this is the one right here, and this light is just a directional light. I can just move it whatever I want because it only has to do with the rotation. The direction is the same. And if I rotate the sky, you'll see this is the only light that rotates around, because the other ones are not part of the sky. Alright, so that is basically the behind the scenes of this scene. Let me see. I have a few more minutes for today's Q&A, so if you have more questions, just put them in the chat and I'll try to answer them. What software do you use to get the most maps? This being normal map and roughness map, how do you use Praise map to textures? Okay, so Steven and Jaime are, I think you guys are asking similar question. Create those maps for the textures. Cool. Yeah, so for the maps of the moss collector, I use a software that is called B2M, and it's really cool. It's part of the family of the Substance Painter and all that, and it's called B2M, which stands for Bitmap to Material. Okay, I have it here. I mean, that's a software that sort of evolved into what is called the Project Alchemy right now, which you can just download for free as a trial one for 30 days. It's really awesome. It allows you to create materials. In fact, once the beta is finished, I'm gonna do an update, because I think this one, I'm just trying to open it right now. I'm gonna close this one so that my computer doesn't get too heavy. So here it is. This is the software that I use to extract those maps. I'm gonna turn off the camera. Right, it's called Bitmap to Material, or B2M, and it's part of the Substance family, which is now Adobe, and it's really useful. The thing is that nowadays I don't use this anymore. I use the Substance Alchemy, because it just has a lot more options and fine-tuning filters. But just a quick way to show you, I'm gonna try to find one that I use. Let's see. Maps, grass. Okay, I'm gonna use the texture map that I use for the, what's the name? The little tree, the log. So it's this one here. So it's just a texture already applied to the UVs. So it looks a little bit messy, but maybe this is not the best example. Let me just find something better. All right, I'm gonna do it with this. So this is the fern, and I'm gonna use I think I lost it. 1 second. Fern, fireflies, grass, moss. All right, here we go. So I'm gonna drag my image in here. So you see my image here, and I'll just drop it into this area. And then you can select what type of input this image is. So to answer, I think it was Steven that asked about how to extract the other maps from the normal map. You can do that from here as well. So you have a normal map, and just when you drag it into here, you select what type of input is. So you can say this is the normal map, and from the normal map you extract the rest. So this one is going to be the main input because it's just color. So here you have just an image, right? But here at the bottom you have an interactive plane with light that you can see some of the details already happening, right? And here at the top you have roughness, metallic, normal map already applied from a single image. So let's say if you want to change the normal or the height, for example, let's just do it with the height. I'm going to go to relief here, and here you can change a bunch of different things. So you can change the format. I'm going to go for OpenGL, and I'm going to change the relief input to, let's leave this one as off, and I'm just going to tweak the low, high, and mid frequencies. So I can just push this back to get more of these smaller details, and you can see in the normal. Maybe want to increase the size of this to 100%. So you'll see a lot of details here, and as I change this slider, they disappeared. And it's all, it's grabbing all these details just from a single image, right? So mid frequencies, high frequencies. This is just a matter of playing around with sliders to fine tune how it looks in here. But all of the rest of the maps, you can tweak them from here. So ambient occlusion, you can go to ambient occlusion here and select the ambient occlusion from here and see what it's doing. And again, just tweak the ambient occlusion. And again, all of this is happening from a single image. So this is a really powerful tool. And like I said, this is kind of like the old version or the dated version, which is really cool still. But nowadays, the Project Alchemist is much more powerful. So that's how I extracted this. So at the end, I went ahead, once I tweak all of this, you can go to output, and here you can select what what maps you want to export. So base color, roughness, metallic is on. Let's say if I want, for some reason, specular, and maybe displacement, all of these, curvature, right? So all of these, as soon as you turn them on, you'll have a tab here to manipulate the influence of each slider. So as soon as I turn the curvature here on, you'll see now I have a curvature slider here, and here I should have a curvature input here. So I can play around with this, how much of this curvature I'm getting. I'm denoising it a little bit, right? So this is how the map is going to look. Now you can also change the output size here. I'm going to keep it as a 512 just because I'm live streaming, but you can change it to whatever you want. I would recommend to keep it based on the input size. So if you input an image that is 2K, that's the maximum I would output so that it doesn't distort the texture. And when you're ready, you just go to export as bitmap and you choose where to export them, and that's it. You export a bunch of PNGs or PSDs, whatever you want. So really powerful stuff, and that is exactly what I did to export these ones. So to export the normal map, the albedo, and in this case the alpha. So I don't have any other ones at this point in this example. All right. So let's see if there's a couple more questions to wrap up today's lesson. Cool. Software, cool. When you create the fiber mesh in ZBrush and you click on accept, is there a way to go back and edit the fiber mesh, or you have to create it again? You have to create it again. There are a couple of things you can do, and I'll show you what. So in ZBrush, here with the fiber mesh, right? What you can do is create the fiber mesh the way that you want it, and tweak everything that you want from the fiber mesh settings, create it, and if it doesn't work, or if you don't like the final result, you can basically delete that one, and when you come back to the sphere where you started, or whatever object you used to create the fiber mesh from, Series is going to remember those settings, so you can keep tweaking them from there. So if I just click preview, and let's say I want to create something like the moss, I'm going to reduce the number of fibers significantly, maybe change the color here just so that you guys can see what I'm doing. I'm going to increase the length a little bit and the coverage, and also make the scale root to 1 and the scale tip to 1 as well. So you'll see this is starting to look more like a series of planes. If you want to make it wider, and you also, I think I covered this already, but if you want to make them wider than the maximum number in the slider, just go to this curve here and then just push it up both ends, so the root and the tip. Now this is also twisting, so let's just remove the twist here, and there you go. So that's already looking much better, and the amount of bending that you're getting is due to the gravity and also to the segments. So if I keep the gravity as it is, 0.5, I can increase the segments, and that is basically adding more resolution to the fibers, and Series is going to say, all right, I have more resolution now, and with the same gravity, it's going to cause these planes to sort of go down more. So I'm going to push this to 12. You'll see they go down more, but increases the number of planes. So if I set this to 1, it's just going to shoot straight from the normal of the polygon, but it's only one polygon. Right, so I'm going to do it, I'm going to leave it at 3. And just to show you how this works in terms of producing this stuff, you can just go to, I'm going to import a texture. Let's have a look which one. I'm testing something for a tutorial that I'm doing, so maybe I'll just show you that one. This is the other thing about this course that you guys are probably going to be the first ones always to see like things that I'm working on, so I can get feedback from you guys. So here is a very simple texture that I created of a leaf. It's not, I mean, it's just very, very, very simple. It's just a shape, right? So if you click on that one, and here in the fiber mesh settings, you click the texture and select that. It's going to ask you if you want to resize it. I'm just going to say no. And you can see now that texture applied across those fibers. So now that you have this applied, you can increase the transparency because I have black all around it. So Series will interpret any black as transparent. And then I'm going to turn on anti-alias like that. And now that I have this applied, I can go ahead and before I save or accept this fiber mesh, I can fine tune it even more. So I can, let's increase the length of it, maybe just push it out a bit. So this embed allows you to push it out or in like that. And maybe I'm going to add more gravity to it, something like that. And that's it. Let's say that I'm happy with this, right? So Jaime's question is, once you accept, click accept, is there a way to change this? The way to change the actual fiber mesh in this case would be to basically, oops, I don't know what happened there. Right, it would be to use the grooming brushes to fine tune how to shape these things, right? But the shape of it is going to be a bit hard to change. So what's good about fiber mesh, like I said, is that if you want to change something, let's say make it bigger or make less or more, all you have to do is go back to the original mesh that you created them from. I'm going to turn this off, and if you click create fiber mesh or preview it, Series is going to remember this. What is even better is that if you save this as a tool, Series also is going to remember the settings of the fiber mesh. So here you can just go ahead and, you know what, I need maybe less. I need less fibers and or more, and I'm happy with that, and I'm going to click accept. So that's pretty much it. That creates these fibers. So this is just now like another mesh or another tool that I can export. So I can go to C plugin, FBX, FBX and export selected or visible, and chuck that into Marmoset. Use the same texture flipped in the y-axis, and you're good to go. So that is kind of what I did with all the rest of these little pieces here. All right. Cool. So if there's no other last minute question, I'm gonna wrap it up here, guys. Hopefully this Q&A help you and give you some ideas of how you can use some of the tools that I share with you in the course. Is the way to play. Cool. All right. So if you guys want, just think about the next sort of like Q&A that you wanna see. We can do it about the B2M software that I showed you, which is not necessarily something that I cover in the course, because we don't really go into the creation of maps from texture. But if it's something that you think is going to be useful, we can cover that, or I can show you a little bit of the Alchemy. What's the name? Project Alchemy. So let me just turn off some of this stuff. So all the Marmoset stuff are relatively low. Okay, I don't know what happened there. So nothing in here, and I'm going to turn this off as well. And you see the materials are very simple as well. Let's get rid of that one. And let's see. Oh, hey John. You might have to catch up with this stream later, because we're wrapping it up. I'm just gonna show you something before I finish, just so that you know which one I'm talking about. So with a new launcher, so this is the Substance launcher. So you can access or launch Substance Painter, Designer, Source, all that. So this one is the Project Alchemist. So if you quick launch, I didn't know about that. Hold Shift and left click. All right, that's interesting. So what? How come is this thing running? I had no idea that it was running. Ah, okay. One second. No, I don't want to evaluate anything. Give me 1 second. All right, so I just updated this. So this is the Project Alchemist. So this is the updated version of what I show you, which is the B2M. You can do virtually the same thing, but you can have way more control and create really nice augmented kind of like materials. So if I go to create, so I have a few of these already that I started testing it with and created like interesting stuff. But if you go to create and you go to, let's say, I'm just trying to find something interesting to show you this with. Which one? All right, I have a fiber mesh that I tested as well. I'm gonna drop this here. So I have an image, this one that I'm holding here right now, and if I just drop it into the viewport here, this software is gonna ask me what do I want to do. So you want to change the bitmap currently, which is the image, into a material, or you want to have multiple image into material. This is kind of like the best way to do it, because if you have multiple images from different angles or like different lightings of the image itself, it's just going to create a more accurate material, and there is a nice tutorial in their website on how to do that, or just use the bitmap to just tweak it. So I'm going to create a material out of this one, although it's not a tileable texture, but just to show you. So you click OK, and it's just going to run these little processes here, create the base material, and if I rotate here, you'll see it is the same kind of like idea of the B2M. So you have, this is just a single image, but it's extracting the normal map, the roughness, everything else, right? The great thing about this is that you can go ahead and fine tune it. So you can select this bitmap to material. So this is the first effect. Click on that, and it opens up all these parameters. So you can change the scale of it, right, just to fine tune it. And this is going to be like a hair card, but it's a bit more complex. Change the height as well. You can do light removal, like in case you have a photo. With the height here, you can also do the same thing, large, medium, and small details. So you see the overlap with the software that I showed you before, right? So you can change this kind of like that. And then go to the roughness or glossiness, and I'm going to change the base value or increase it. It's not doing much. Varying that should do something, but it's not doing it. And the ambient occlusion as well. You can change the radius. This one is not displaying it. But that's essentially what this software allows you to do. Is just take a single image and then just convert it into a material, basically. And if it is a tileable texture, then you can just export that and use it in Substance Painter. Like I said, this is a really powerful tool that once is official, or maybe if it's not, if as soon as I have a moment, because this is kind of like a good addition. It doesn't change the workflow or anything in the course, but it will be a good addition, and I can show you how to create custom materials from bitmaps to use in Substance Painter. So the other thing that is good about this is that you can add a bunch of other stuff. So let's say you go here to the effects or add a layer, and you can go for, let's say, adjustments. You click adjustments, select that, and this one allows you to change a bunch of stuff. So I'm going to change reflection. Again, it's not doing it for some reason, but it should change. The scale, the height, we already did that, so I'm going to click delete that one and just do something else. For example, water. I can go for water here. So if I add water, this is going to add an extra sort of like layer on top that makes it look like this hair is kind of like dipped into the water. So if I select the water, I can just change the water level. So I can do something like that, right? So it looks like the hair is kind of on the water, right? And I can change the darkness of the water, so just make it very muddy, and change the edge wetness, so around the kind of like the intersection of this virtual plane that is created with the mesh. Just make it dirty, and here, sorry, wet, and here dirtiness. I can just make the quality of the dirt even more. I think it's already quite dirty, but you can just tweak all these things, and it's very, very intuitive. You just change parameters here and see it in real time. And once you're happy with this, you can just go ahead and click export, and it will export all of these maps. So you go export here, current view. So you go export current view, and it's going to ask you what do you want to export. So base color, normal, height. You want to export it as a substance material already, or you can export it as a PNGs. So a bunch of maps, select where to export it, give it a name, and that's pretty much it. So it's really, really helpful, really powerful, very intuitive. And if you guys want, I'm happy to do a walkthrough of that later on, and just add it maybe as a bonus content for the course. Again, it's not going to change drastically the workflows. It's just an added bonus or an added thing that you can also do to produce materials from textures. Cool. All right. So no worries, John. Catch up with this. I'll put the link as soon as we finish here. I'm gonna get out of the house, but when I'll come back, I'll set everything up, and you can catch up from the link that we all have in the community. All right. So I'm gonna leave it here, guys. Thank you for stopping by. Hopefully you find this Q&A useful, and let me know what you think we should do for the next next Q&A. By the way, I'm already setting up the first student challenge. So if you guys want to participate, I don't wanna rush into pushing this into you guys, because I know some of you are just starting with the course. So there's a good variation, or in terms uh, of at what point of the course everyone is. So some people are just starting, some other people are just finishing up. So I'm gonna do a challenge that I think is gonna benefit everyone else, and is kind of like to create a library that everyone can use. So you'll see it's gonna be very cool, and that's coming up next. And also, I mean, like I mentioned before, in the middle of talking an awesome artist into coming as a guest, and is going to be about 3D printing, which is something that the course doesn't really get into it, because it's not really about that. But I know you guys are interested in that as well, so I'm going to see if I can lock it in, and you'll see why it's so cool. And hopefully he's gonna give us some ideas on how to 3D printing characters and all those sort of stuff. So keep an eye on all that. It's gonna be great. More stuff coming up, and yeah. So that's it for me today, guys. Have fun and enjoy the rest of the week, and keep adding stuff to the community. It's really, really awesome to just wake up and see all the progress that you guys are doing. I try to check it every day, at least to see what's been happening. Cool, guys. So I'll leave it here, and I'll put the link soon so you can catch up with it. All right. Take it easy and keep up the good work. Cheers.